folks, hope you're well. I really hope you do. Right, on the back of a message that I received earlier on today from Keith, one of our loyal followers. Got it wrong about you, Keith. I do apologise. Really sorry for the confusion there a few weeks ago. Keith said, I hope you're going to mention the late, great Stanley Bowles. I say late, it only happened yesterday. I thought I heard he died yesterday, Keith. I wasn't certain. I'm flicking through things on the old internet yesterday, and I've got MSN on in one of the... It's open somewhere, and I'm looking at MSN, and I thought I seen something about Bowles, and I had to click out because I'd taped the rugby league. I watched the rugby league myself, the big game last night, Wigan and Penrith, which we're going to cover later, and I didn't want to know the score. It was about 10:10, and I thought, I'm sure I've heard Bowles has died. So I would have seen it today in the papers and I would have covered it. I mean, a great player that he was Stan. But I probably wouldn't have covered it in such depth as I'm going to. It's not going to be a long one, this, but I'm going to bring a few names in because Keith mentioned Bowles and another couple of names, and I've got 3 or 4 more for you, Keith. And maybe we'll get... What did... Someone told me what Mrs. Merton said the other... Heated. We might have a heated debate with me, Keith, and anyone else that wants to join in. You'll give me some players that I've totally forgotten. Keith said, I hope you're going to cover it, and he mentioned us say another couple of names, so we're going to do it now, Keith. Right, Stanley Bowles, and I've got something I read in the paper. You might have the same paper, Keith. You might have read it yourself. You might not. That I thought was really funny. But before we go to the bit... in fact, we'll cover that first. Stanley Bowles. Now, they class him as a maverick. I think he was something of a forward, but I think he's played midfield as well as a forward. To that end, what I've done, I've got the names of 4 or 5 midfielders come forwards, but not that you class as centre forwards. You know, out-and-out goal scorers. And I've put some names of some players down that had that maverick quality. You never knew what they were going to do next. Great on the ball. The social life away from football was often hectic. And I've got a couple of steady eddies in there who were brilliant at what they did, that were also great midfielders, but not your mavericks as such. And I've just had a little look, and I'll explain why in a moment. Well, I'll explain why when I get to the end of it. But let me tell you something about Bowles first. I mean, I never... realised what his age was. I knew he was 70s or 80s. He actually died yesterday, aged 75. I think he's been in a nursing home for a while. He's dementia for about 7 or 8 years. I believe for a few years now, he's not known anybody that's come to visit him. He's forgotten all about his football. Well, it's a great shame. But I read something in the paper today after hearing from Keith, and it was about Stanley himself. This is how much of a maverick he was. This is how he used to look at a football day. A football day with a football game at QPR on a Saturday afternoon. His itinerary went something like this. 2 into the corner shop for a packet of fags, and he'd spark his first one up. 2 into the pub for a very quick pint. 2:45 into the bookmakers to place his bets for the day. 2:50 into the changing rooms. He's lucky that all 3 places must have been right outside the ground there. They must have been all next door to one another, man. Anyway, 2:50 into the change room, kit on, boots on the lot. He's missed the team talk, but the manager let him go because it was Stanley Bowles and he got what he wanted on the pitch of him. 3 o'clock he's on the pitch ready to start the game. At 3:30 he's asking people in the crowd at the old barriers there, what happened in the first couple of races at ADOC today, or Ascot today, or Epsom today, or wherever, and he's got people relaying racing results. Half time he's listening for racing results on the radio, not listening to the team talk, back out for the second half. 25 minutes into the second half, again he's asking the fans, what happened in this race, what happened in that, and they're giving him the racing results. He knows whether he's up or down for the day. Game ended, does the old interviews and what have you, into the changing room, gets changed, bump, out. Straight into the bookie to see how his bets have done and to collect and maybe put another couple of bets on. Into the pub for a quick pint or 2. Then he might go to the dog track if he's racing at a local dog track, in and around that there London, and then out for the night. With his good friend, I know his name and I can't remember it, another QPR player who he used to live with at the time. And that was Stanley Bowles this Saturday afternoon. Colourful? You're not kidding. I don't think they get away with it today. I thought Bestie took the mick before a football game, but oh my God, Stanley really took the biscuit there. Right, which reminded me, I did something on a few different players. I looked at Stanley Bowles. Now I know he never had lots of England caps. They say managers didn't trust him because of the way he led his life and they never knew what they were going to get from him on the pitch. Although often it was going to be brilliant, it wasn't structured. And someone like your Alf Ramsey wouldn't have liked that at all. Yeah, Stanley died at 75, 5 England caps. What surprised me about Bowles, I've probably heard this before, but I've forgotten if I have heard it. He was born in Collyhurst in Manchester. Now, many of you might not know that. Many of you might know that. Tell you what else came from Collier's, a very, very famous son, Les Dawson. You know Les, don't you? Les came from there as well. Used to be a boxer, Les, before he was a comedian and whatever else. Used to be a boxer, came from Collier's. Yeah, so did Stan Bowles, I never knew that. Keith also mentioned Rodney Marsh. Rodney Marsh, 9 caps, again underused. Great player. But the big story with Rodney, or the couple of big stories, is he went to City when they were flying and looking at winning the league. Went there, totally different kind of player than anything they've been used to before. Wanted a lot of the ball, often wanted to keep the ball. Went there on big money. They say it disrupted the squad, and I think that year they never won the league, yet they expected to. I think they signed him and he was supposed to be the icing on the cake. It didn't work out that way. My big memories of Marsh should be when he's playing for Fulham with Best and Bobby Moore. Used to love it. There's a lot of pictures out there on that there YouTube. You can look at that. And Best and Marsh are having a fantastic time. I like Rodney Marsh, no problems at all. He also mentioned Tony Curry. Now, funnily enough, my memory, Keith, and anyone else that's in this crap, I keep saying this, it's true. I remember lots of names. Don't remember what games they played, how many goals they scored. I don't remember much about them. I really don't. My memory is absolutely crap. But Tony Curry was always a player that I absolutely loved. I think primarily for Sheffield United, your unfashionable team, if you like. And I loved him and I thought he was great. And growing up, because I'd have been like 10, 12, 13, 14 when he was in his pomp, he was one of my favourite players in the whole league. I've been a Man United supporter since 5 or 6. So United always came first. But I had 3 or 4 favourite players from other teams, and Tony Curry was at the top of that list, or very near the top. I used to love Tony Curry. Maybe it's the blonde locks, but I'd like him, and he probably played nothing like him at all. Keith might tell me this, and others might. Like Kevin De Bruyne. He was brilliant at what he did. His range of passing was fantastic. He was relatively quick, but not a real speedster. I think De Bruyne's the same. I think he was reasonably strong like De Bruyne. I think he had it all in his game like De Bruyne. I think he was great, and I can't believe he only got 17 caps. I thought he was brilliant, Tony Curry. I really did. Man, you read something quickly about him today. He said he was regularly injured. I don't remember that. And then I'll give you 2 steady eddies. You had Colin Bell, 48 caps, and Sir Bobby Charlton, 106. They were 70s as well. Now, they were your midfielders who ran all day. Loads and loads of talent. One of them had an absolutely cannonball of a shot. 2 absolutely great players, but they were more your workhorses, but they could do everything. Alan Ball would probably fall into that camp as well. He got 72 caps. I think they say he was man of the match in the World Cup for all he didn't score the World Cup final. They said he played a blinder, I believe, up and down that wing there. All great players, but not with your Flair of your Marsh, your Curry and your Stan Bowles. We'll go back to Flair again. Alan Hudson, 2 caps. Did he get knocked over once? I think he did, or something like that happened to him, and he missed a fair old part of his career because of it. I think he came back. I don't think he was ever the same player again. And then I thought of Frank Worthington. I know he was mainly a forward, but he had played in midfield as well. And when you think of Worthington, you just think of outrageous skills. I mean, I don't mean as an Elvis impersonator, although I know he did pretty well at that. He had dress sense like Sir Rod Stewart. I do remember that. Yeah, his dress sense extremely flamboyant. But at least Frank would be in his sort of late 20s, early 30s, unlike Rod in his 70s and 80s, trying to be Frank and Elvis put together. I like Frank. I thought it was great to watch. Again, unfashionable team. Is it Bolton in the main? All great players. And then I'll give you 2 more midfielder stroke wingers who had all the talent in the world. Jimmy Johnston. Was it Celtic? Of course it was. 23 caps for Scotland. An unbelievable talent. And then the greatest of them all for me, again, Keith mentioned him, George Best. 37 for Northern Ireland. I thought he got more than that. They used to say the greatest player never to win the World Cup was Ryan Giggs, or never to play in the World Cup. He certainly wasn't. It was certainly Bestie. Giggs, he couldn't lace his boots, and I mean couldn't lace his boots. And it's crazy because Bestie had probably the shortest career of all the greats, and Giggs had one of the longest careers, polar opposites. But I would suggest Best did more in his 3 or 4 top years than in Giggs' main 10 or 12 years. George Best was just unbelievable. Done something, Keith, if you're looking back videos and you put in the search bar George Best, I think I've done 2 or 3 on him. I did one on his 77th birthday, and there's a tie-in to me there, Keith. When I say to me, we've never met, we're not relatives, we're not fans of one another. Well, I'm a fan of his, but there's a personal story about me and George Best there. George Best at 77 or 77th birthday. It's in there anyway. You'll find it there. I absolutely adored George Best. Growing up, he was my idol. Always was, always has been. The day he died and the day they buried him, bad days for me. Bad days. And then after that, I'll give you 2 players and I'll tell you why. We had Glenn Hoddle, who was a wonderful midfielder, again a maverick, brilliant on the ball with 53 caps. And then I've got one, and I've asterisked 3. This one here brings all the great qualities of Rodney Marsh, Tony Curry and Frank Worthington. Oh, and Stanley Bowles. Pick Bowles, Marsh, Curry and Worthington, add them all up, and I've got one player that had a bit of all of those, I think, and I think he's the most underused player for England in my time on this planet. In my 60 odd years on this planet, there's one person out there that I think that's been more underused than anybody else, that deserves many, many, many more caps. He's somebody that at this moment in time is getting brickbats for a lot of people because he's actually sticking his head above the parapet and saying things that many people don't like. And some of them might be nutty, some of them might be wrong, but it's his opinion and he should be able to give it. And that player is Matt Le Tissier. I thought Le Tissier was a magician, an absolute magician. If you get everybody that's ever played in the Premier League and get the top 15 or 20 goals and put showreels out and put Le Tissier's next to him, I doubt there's any player, and I mean any player, with a better showreel than his. I really do. I just think he was a genius. He didn't play for a fashionable club and he wasn't the quickest person in the world. In fact, he was relatively slow, but up here, as quick as you can be. Like Kane now. Kane's slow, but up here he's so quick, it's unbelievable. But Le Tissier often dropped a little bit further back. He could have played as a 10 for anybody, spraying the ball around, scoring goals from 30, 35 yards out. You'd trust him with the penalty, wouldn't you? Of course you would. Absolutely brilliant. Matthew Le Tissier has lots of them qualities that them players that Keith mentioned. I think he was absolutely brilliant and criminally underused. And the irony is, Hoddle, who probably should have got even more caps, was his boss and knew all about talent because he had it in bundles himself. And I think he just deliberately didn't want Le Tissier on that stage and showing his wares. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I think it was a personal thing there. Anyway, that's another story. And it's a story I don't know the answer to. So Keith, I've rounded up a few. There'll be loads more. Anybody that can come up with anybody else from the 70s, from a golden era of English football, and mention to us the English, the Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, the great midfielders, although the great people that were mavericks of the game, that you didn't know what they're going to do next. I mean, I could have put somebody like Dalglish in there, but again, he was more up front than anything else for me. And for all he was great on the ball and a wonderful player and a wonderful talent, I don't think he had some of the skill levels that some of those have. Like I'm on about the tricks that you get with Marsh and with Bowles and people like of that ilk, and Worthington. So I didn't. But anyway, any thoughts from anybody? Just bang them in the comment section. Let's have a heated debate. It doesn't have to be heated, but Mrs. Merton used to say that. And last time I spoke about it, I forgot what the actual the word before debate was. Somebody pointed out it was heated. So we'll go with that. And I love Mrs. Merton or Caroline. I liked her a lot. Still do.